Ever feel like the way we talk about sexuality is kind of, well, limiting?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a really complex topic, right?
Totally. So today we're going deep, folks, unpacking the history of sexuality itself.
We've got some serious academic firepower on our side today, too.
PhD-level analysis of sexuality. A very short introduction. That's a Véronique Mautier for those playing at home.
Heavy hitter. And this analysis, let me tell you, really digs into how we got to this point.
Like, where do we even start? The birds and the bees.
Way before that. Think ancient cultures, ancient Rome, Greece.
Okay, so togas and different ideas about sexuality, I'm guessing?
Different is an understatement. The analysis makes it clear. Like, for them, sexuality as a separate, defining thing didn't really exist.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're saying the ancient world, no concept of sexuality? How'd that even work?
It was all about the act itself, not some label or identity. Like, the analysis talks about how, for them, it was mainly about penetration. Who's doing what to whom,
Okay, so less about who you're into, more about the mechanics. That's a pretty different perspective.
Right. And this really gets to the heart of how differently they saw things.
Yeah.
Like, there's this mention of Uranian love in Plato's Symposium, right?
Uranian love. Sounds fancy. What's that all about?
Basically same-sex relationships, but not in the way we think of it. More like a specific type of connection, not a whole identity.
Huh. So even labeling something as gay or straight, that's a newer thing than we might realize.
Exactly. And that leads to the big question. Where did our concept of sexuality come from then?
Yeah, if the ancients weren't out there having pride parades, someone must come up with this whole sexuality thing at some point.
And they did, but it took a while. Fast forward to the 18th, 19th centuries, think Darwin, science booming, that whole categorization craze.
Oh yeah, putting things in boxes. Very organized.
Well, not always in a good way, unfortunately. The analysis points out that while Darwin's theories were huge, they kind of fueled this need to categorize human behavior, including, yep, you guessed it, sexuality.
So we're talking about the birth of labels like homosexual, heterosexual, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It wasn't just about understanding anymore. It became about defining what was normal, what was deviant. You can see how that could get messy.
Yeah, a little bit. Labels can be powerful, for better or worse.
And this period, this is when it really starts to ramp up. The analysis even talks about how sexology emerged as a science. On the one hand, it's like progress. On the other hand,
it's like, whoa, are we labeling and maybe even controlling desires now?
it's complicated. Makes you think about the motivations, the social anxieties of the time, all feeding into this.
So not just objective science then, more like a reflection of what people wanted to see, maybe.
It's always more complicated than it seems, right? And it's something we're still dealing with today. The legacy of those categories, the whole normal versus not normal thing.
It's a good point. But we can't talk about sexuality without, well, talking about everyone involved. How did women fit into all of this?
That is a great question. And honestly, it gets pretty intense.
Yeah.
Women have always faced a unique set of challenges when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, something tells me it wasn't all sunshine and roses for them.
Unfortunately, you're right. This PhD analysis, it doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. Like, it talks about how the rise of anti-pornography movements, often framed as morality, were really about controlling women's sexuality more than anything. It's like this whole idea that women needed protection from these, dangerous desires, wild stuff.
It's giving very much women are delicate flowers,
Exactly. And it gets worse. The analysis even talks about these intellectual debates about whether female pleasure was even real.
Wait, seriously, they were debating the female orgasm like it was some mythical creature.
Not too far off. It's kind of funny now, but it just shows you how deep those double standards ran.
No kidding. But the analysis, it does mention some pushback, right? Women weren't just taking this lying down, I hope.
Absolutely not. That's where political lesbianism comes in.
Political lesbianism. Okay, now we're talking. Tell me everything.
Basically, it was about women rejecting those traditional roles, those patriarchal structures, and finding empowerment through connections with other women.
So romance aside, it was about, solidarity, sisterhood.
Exactly. Challenging the status quo, redefining what relationships could be. And it wasn't just happening in the vacuum either, The analysis makes it clear. Governments, institutions, they've always been involved in this whole sexuality thing.
Oh, for sure. Trying to control everyone's love life since, well, forever, probably.
Right. And the analysis gets specific. Think about the AIDS crisis response, even the whole terrifying history of eugenics.
Yeah, not exactly shining moments for respecting people's autonomy.
You said it. Governments using public health, social order, all these justifications to control behavior.
It's like just because something's for the greater good doesn't mean it's not messed up.
100%. And this is where it all becomes really relevant, even today. Think about the debates around LGBTQ plus rights, what's taught in schools, healthcare access.
Whoa, it all connects back, huh?
Right. It's not just history, it's the present. And it all comes down to these fundamental questions about who gets to define sexuality.
So, from ancient Greece to now, we're still grappling with the same stuff. Kind of depressing, honestly. But is there hope? Like, can we actually break free from these patterns, or are we stuck?
That is the question, isn't it? And honestly, I'm not sure anyone has the answer. But the analysis does point to some interesting shifts happening. Things like queer theory gaining traction.
Okay, queer theory. Hit me with it. How's that different?
Well, it's about challenging those rigid categories we've been talking about, like gay, straight, lesbian. Queer theory is like, what if those are just constructs, not some ultimate truth?
So it's more about, like, fluidity, individual expression. What does that even look like in practice?
Right. It's all about breaking down those boxes. And the source material seems to suggest we're moving towards a more fluid understanding of identity. Less about labels, more about self-discovery.
I like the sound of that. But before we get too deep into the future of sexuality, you mentioned something about a mistake in the original book, some academic drama.
Oh, yeah. This PhD analysis, it actually calls out a factual error in sexuality.
Yeah.
Very short introduction.
Gasp. A mistake in a book. You don't say.
Right. So the book claims this 19th century activist, Karl Heinrich Ulrichs, he founded the cult of Uranism. Except, not quite.
Hold up. Uranism. That rings a bell.
We talked about it earlier. The ancient Greeks, same-sex relationship.
Right. Not a cult thing then. Gotcha.
Nope. The PhD analysis sets the record straight, says the term Uranism was already in use way before Ulrichs, like John Taylor in the 18th century, for example.
Even academics get it wrong sometimes, huh? Good reminder to, like, always double-check your facts.
Exactly. Always be critical no matter who wrote it, right?
Yeah, truth. Okay, so we've gone from ancient Rome through Darwin all the way to queer theory and debunking academic myths. It's a lot to unpack, huh? Where do we even go from here with all this information?
That's the million-dollar question. But hey, at least now we have some context, right?
True, true. We've gone from ancient ideas about acts to, like, Victorian-era labeling and now queer theory shaking things up.
Let's not forget, through it all, those in power trying to, control the narrative.
Oh, yeah, always got to have someone trying to set the rules for everyone else.
It's a reminder that progress isn't a straight line, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
More like a drunken stumble toward progress sometimes, am I right? But hey, at least we're moving, right?
Exactly. And by understanding this history, we can hopefully make more informed choices now.
So, like, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What do we do with all this knowledge about sexuality?
I think the biggest thing is if sexuality really is fluid, always changing, then we got to approach it with openness, curiosity even.
So less about fitting into those boxes, those labels, and more about figuring out what works for us, like individually.
Exactly. This isn't the end of the story, right? It's a conversation that's been going on for centuries, and we're all part of it.
Ooh, I like that. We're all part of the great sexuality conversation. But you know what time it is, right?
Time for the final thought-provoking question.
You know it, the one that'll keep our listeners up at night, so hit us with it.
If our understanding of sexuality is always evolving, what does that mean for how we want to shape the future of relationships, identity, desire, all of it?
Ooh, heavy stuff. It's like we're building the plane while we're flying it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have the chance to build a future where everyone feels seen, heard, respected, no matter how they define themselves.
Now that's a future I can get behind. Well, folks, there you have it. We journeyed from ancient Rome to modern-day debates, debunked some myths along the way.
I hopefully spark some new ways of thinking about sexuality, both our own and, as a society.
Absolutely. So until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and never be afraid to challenge the norms. That's a wrap on this deep dive.